What's up, everybody out there in YouTube land? Another little Dimir League for you. So I've been having like an absolute blast playing through Dimir recently. So that's why you're seeing like a bunch of videos of Dimir and not so much of other variations. Don't worry, we're getting to other variations, but I kind of want to see like how the Pro Tour goes, what kind of decks evolve after that, so I can start like tuning a little bit more. Want to start playing in some more challenges again, like really take that approach of let's see if we can win with Shadow, whatever event we decide to fire up on. So it's going to be a lot of like nailing down specific archetypes of Shadow instead of really jumping around as much. But like I said, still going to be some jumping around, so I don't think that's out of the works. But again, at the moment, really having fun tuning Dimir, so that's kind of what this voiceover league's all about. I do have to say before we start this league or start showing the matches, the league was before some of the changes in the screenshot here. So, for example, this first one did not have Harbinger of the Seas in the sideboard. It did not have the extra force negations in the sideboard. We'll get to why I swapped those over towards the end of the video, but you'll see, like, I think that's the only variation for this one. It had, like, another Stern Scolding and something else in that spot. Not really a big deal. It doesn't change the main deck. It doesn't change most of the play patterns. But when we get to the matchups, why I wanted to make that change, I'll go over what that was, what it looked like, so you can kind of see the thought process. The video or the league you're about to go through also has all blue fetches. You'll notice some of the ones in the image here are black fetches, like Bloodstained Mire. That's to accommodate basic swamp for the Harbinger of the Seas in the sideboard. You do not want to get caught with your pants down, not having a basic swamp on your side of the field when you drop Harbinger. Other than that, let's go ahead and hop into it. As always, down below, I'll have the current deck list. So whether it's what's on screen or not, no idea, but it'll be the current deck list that I would take to an event right now. Have link to the Twitter in case you want to know when a stream's going live, link to the Twitch in case you want to see that live stream, and a link to the Discord if you want to come join the CntrlFreak Discord, talk all things Shadow, non-Shadow, Modern in general. You get the idea. Either way, let's jump into it. Not too much to say about the deck. If you've been watching a lot of these Dimir videos, then you pretty well know how the deck works. Most of these videos are less so about like fine-tuning decision points, but more about talking how to discuss certain matchups that we encounter, what to look for, things I screwed up, things I did well, and kind of have a discussion around that. And then y'all can look back and say, oh, well, this kind of sideboarding plan worked against this deck. This is some decision points that didn't work out the way that he wanted it to. I can learn from that. Or you can always come in and be like, all your lines are terrible. I don't play that way, and I win 20 times as much as you do, which is also valid. So let's get going. We're on the play. Game number 1. We got a Tamiyo with a force negation to protect it, a preordained to maybe flip Tamiyo on our turn 2, depending on what we draw. Find another preordain, which lets us get this polluted delta down that we find off the first preordain. Go ahead and flip our Tamiyo. It looks like we're up against like a Nadu matchup with Delighted Halfling. Since they didn't have anything in the yard, we can't drown in the lock the Halfling, but we can just go ahead and flip the Tamiyo. So I did not know before this match that Bestow makes your card a non-creature spell. I thought it was like a creature at all points, and maybe it was like an enchantment when it was on the battlefield, whatever. But I did have to Google it, and I found out that you can force a negation to Bestow card. So we're able to force a Springheart Nantuko there, really stop our opponent's development on the board. Then they surveil away a Haywire Might so we can kill the Halfling, keep another Drown back in case they find a Nadu. And with Nethergoyf out, counterspells in hand, like, we're just going to ride Tamiyo ult to victory. We're going to counterspell anything they put on the stack, ult our Tamiyo, move on to the next game. So, I'll go over, like, sideboarding real quick. Sideboarding against the Nadu deck, for the most part, just, like, boarding out some of the non-creature counters. Like, in this list, I had a force in the main, no forces in the sideboard. So I boarded out that force, boarded out the stubborn denials, boarded out a couple counter spells. Because like with Halfling, they're a little slow. Boarded in toxic deluges, boarded in stern scoldings. And for the most part, that's about it. But what I was going to say is Tamiyo. When I tell you this card has been nuts in leading to so many free wins for me, I am dead serious. Like, I think the card is not only super fun to play, but gives kind of that combo element that Shadows never had, of where, oh, it doesn't really matter what's going on around it. If I can ult this Tamiyo, I can win the game. I can find some way to win the game from there. And a lot of times, I might have mentioned it in the last video. I can't remember if I mentioned it in the video or like in a Twitch, not a Twitch call, a Discord call. I think there are a lot of really good Tamiyo decks. I think Dimir Death Shadow or any of the Shadow decks with like 4 Bauble, 4 Wraith, 4 Preordain are the best decks at making Tamiyo into a legitimate early game win condition. That's I don't even know if it's a hot take, but being able to flip Tamiyo on like turn 2, so many decks can't interact with that profitably, and you're able to just like counterspell 1 or 2 cards, and all of a sudden you're just ulting her and winning the game. So if you're not sold on Tamiyo yet, I get it, but I am. So I'm going to see a lot of Tamiyo on the channel. On to game 2 anyway. We keep a pretty good hand, got some interaction. We've got Fatal Push, Drown, Deluge. We've got a threat with Nethergoyf. Nethergoyf has also been really, really good. It's like another Halfling. Finding this fetch land here, I do want to talk sequencing. I could go ahead and Fatal Push the Delighted Halfling. My fear is that my opponent might have a Veil of Summer, and if they're able to respond with Fetch Shock Veil of Summer, I lose not only my removal spell, uncounterable Nadu, big tempo swing. They've got a mana advantage. So I would rather hold my Fatal Push till their upkeep so that I can fetch shock, push the Halfling, and if they have a Veil of Summer then they can go to their turn, cast a Nadu, but that's like it. They can't do anything else with their mana. But my opponent decides to fetch, so I'm going to, in response, fetch shock, kill their Halfling, puts the 3rd card in the yard, so if they do have a Nadu, we can Drown in the Lock, or we can Toxic Deluge or something. Instead, they go for a Springheart Nantuko with no land. So I'm just going to go ahead and deluge that away just to be mana efficient. So if I find another land, I can start double spelling. There's a Nadu, which they do get a land off of, but we get Nadu off the board. We could deluge, but I really want to save this second deluge for a turn where they like go off a little bit, flood the board, and then I can follow it up with a deluge. That way I'm not losing to like a go wide Nantuko off the top or something. It's just going to put an endless stream of chump blockers. But at this point, like, I've got double counter spell. I don't think there's a lot my opponent's going to do or can do that I really care about. All we got to do is keep a Nadu off the board, and yeah. I do think if you're looking for a deck that has a pretty good game plan into Nadu, this is probably one you want to look at. I think just being proactive, playing to the board, playing some good permission, having removal spells for halfling, all really, really nice and making the Nadu matchup a lot more manageable. Either way, nice game 1 win. On to match number 2. Again, turn 2 flip Tamiyo if that's something that we're able to pull off. Unfortunately, Thoughtseize takes our Tamiyo. I did have a question. Let me pause real quick. I did have a question in Discord about if you're like so high on Tamiyo, why aren't you playing 4 copies of them? And I think that's a very valid question. For me, it's a feel thing. Like, I tried 2 Tamiyo, I tried 3, I tried 4. When I was playing 2, I didn't feel like I was seeing it enough for a card that I really think is, again, a legitimate win condition in these decks. When I was playing 4, I had so many hands that would have like 2, and it's not a card I ever want to see 2 copies of. Now, I know that you can play the first one, you can flip it, and then play the second one and start like attacking and getting treasures and whatnot. But the way the games have been playing out for me, if I have that first one and I manage to flip it, I never want to see the second one. I just want to see more counter spells, more drowning locks, more pushes, because all I care about at that point is protecting that flip Tamiyo until I'm able to ultimate and win the game from there. Everything else, pretty irrelevant. Occasionally, you'll see matches where we flip a Tamiyo and like play out a Shadow, play out a Nethergoyf. And for the most part, it's a diversion tactic. It's a, hey, stop looking at the Tamiyo over here with 6 loyalty and start focusing on the Death Shadow here with 5 power. And a lot of the times it works. People go for the Shadow, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to ultimate this Tamiyo. Okay, Thoughtseize you, Shadow, stub your removal spell, force a negation your backup play, untap, Wraith, kill you. And so that's my my 2 cents on the why not play 4 argument. Is just I haven't felt like I needed the 4th. Like, sometimes you'll randomly see one and it feels great. Sometimes you don't, but you still have like 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Nethergoyf as early game plays. You've got Preordain. So you got a lot of stuff you can do when you don't see Tamiyo. It's not your only win condition. Okay, so opponent played a couple Thoughtseizes. Just going to go ahead and drop down Nethergoyf here. I could sit on Counterspell, but I really don't want my Nethergoyf to get Thoughtseized, and I don't really know what they're up to yet. So usually if I don't know what my opponent's up to, I kind of like to err on the side of being proactive, getting a board presence, kind of seeing how things go, push the envelope a little bit. So Tarmogoyf, we're going to counterspell that. And then they have a Witherbloom command. I was nowhere on my radar was Witherbloom command, but that should give us a pretty clear indication that they're probably a Saga deck if they have the command. So I don't want to forget about that going into the post board. Shadow Spear, we'll go ahead and just counterspell, land. So I end up top decking not top decking. I have the Street Wraith, and I could cycle it and look for a removal spell for the Tarmogoyf, which I probably should have done since they had to block the Shadow anyway. But at the moment, I was kind of like, well, I don't know what they have. I don't want to overextend, like lose more life, overextend, and then just be dead like a Tarmogoyf or something. So it was more like I'm not going to cycle this Street Wraith until I have to, or until they put something on the stack, because I can't change the top card anyway. If it's a Thoughtseize or something, then it wouldn't be effective. If it is like a Preordain, it feels kind of bad, but I just don't want to lose life if I don't have to. Game 2, against the, I'm assuming, again, Urza Saga deck, because we saw Witherbloom command. Not a whole lot to change. I think I brought out like some Thought Seizes and a Wraith, yeah, and a Force Negation for a couple Spell Bombs, Nihil Spell Bombs, and I've forgotten what the other cards were. Maybe we see them. Good. Pretty good 7. Like, we get to see a bunch of cards, and that's always fun. Could preordain early, but I kind of want to hold up a Fatal Push in case they have a Tarmogoyf here. Looks like a Saga. Which also means that no Bowmaster's coming at me. And I like not having a Bowmaster in the face of my double preordain hand. So, we're going to Thoughtseize them. We take a Grist, leave them with a, was it Blot Out? Just like exile a creature. I've never seen that card before in my life. It's some, what's that set that the human that pumps all your humans is for? Or Aftermath? I think that's the name of the set. It's like a card from Aftermath. And yeah, regardless, they are on Saga, as we can see. And we find out that they are on Invasion of Ikoria, which was kind of common Shadow tech for all of a week and a half, maybe. Sultai Shadow Invasion goes to get Vampire Hexmage. You can use the Vampire Hexmage to sack, remove the counters from the Invasion of Ikoria, and you flip it into an 8/8 dinosaur that your creatures can deal combat damage as if they weren't blocked. So it kind of gives like a Battle Rage-esque effect to Sultai, where you're able to build out a board of Tarmogoyf, Shadow, whatever. Then Invasion for this big dinosaur, attack in, and then just like basically have all your dudes be unblockable. It's cool tech. Here, we're going to go ahead and like start trying to force the issue. I was not expecting them to sack the Hexmage here. I was just killing the Tarmogoyf, but they did go ahead and sack the Hexmage, so I'll go to my turn and Fatal Push the dinosaur while I've got like Counterspell up for maybe a Veil of Summer or something. Got a Construct and a Shadow Spear. I don't want them taking my Fatal Push, so I'll go ahead and Counterspell the Inquisition there. Take their Bowmaster, leave them with a Soul Guide Lantern. Push the Construct. Now I'm just going to sit on Drown in the Lock. They do have a couple redraws with these lanterns. So here, the level 0 play is let me Drown in the Lock my opponent's Dryad Arbor and then attack in for lethal. The problem with that is if my opponent like cracks a Soul Guide Lantern and finds a Fatal Push, they get to kill my Shadow and kind of stop my clock altogether. Right now, I'm the aggressor. They have to stop my Shadow. If they crack a Soul Guide and find a Fatal Push, I got Drown in the Lock to counter it, keep my Shadow around, which is a big deal. If they don't find anything, they block, and I counterspell their next play on their turn. Either way, I can still follow it up with Tamiyo after combat, but I'm just kind of like putting all the onus on them to deal with the Shadow. And I don't want them, again, like finding a Fatal Push for my Shadow, and I just give up my entire clock for Tamiyo. Not that Tamiyo is not worth it. Tamiyo is Bay. And just like that, they find a Legion's End and a Fatal Push. So they could have had the Fatal Push right there from the start. I don't know if they did or not. But regardless, we have a Tamiyo. And I don't know. Sequencing. I know they have Bowmaster in their deck, which is unfortunate. But I want to crack the bobble on their turn. 1, so it doesn't play into Thoughtseize. 2, so that I draw the card on my turn. Then I have my draw step. Then attack with Tamiyo and make a clue token I can crack. So that I can just flip my Tamiyo on my turn if they don't find any way to stop it. Finding a Stubborn Denial is pretty cool if I can find a big threat. Play out our new Tamiyo. See, I told you at the beginning of the video, I knew you could flip Tamiyo and play out a new one. I got it. Opponent's got one card in hand. Don't know what it is. Kind of feels like a Thoughtseize or something like that. So I'm just going to get back a Preordain, which finds me into a relevant threat. Pass the turn. Got a Stubborn Denial up. If they make a Construct, I can fell the Profane to kill the Construct. Crack our Clue. Oh, I wish I had a fourth Tamiyo. So we attack in. I want to attack first before I cast anything, so that if for some reason I need to crack that Clue, it's there. It's kind of one of those, just have all of your resources available when you make an action. Even if that action doesn't actually matter, just having the stuff there just in case. Maybe the way I always explain it to people is I'm an idiot when it comes to knowing Magic cards. I don't know 99% of the stuff that's out there, so there are cards with effects I've never heard of. There could be a card out there that says target player sacrifices a creature or an artifact. And I just saved my shadow because I made a Clue token off Tamiyo. I don't know. So for me, I always think it's better to like play around the thing. I don't know that I don't know. So round 3 against some sort of blue-red energy deck. Could be Jeskai, could be blue-red Wizards. Looks like it's Jeskai because we see a Solitude on top. So I believe this deck has done pretty well in some events recently. It's like a Jeskai energy control deck with Galvanic Discharge, obviously, Teferi, Solitude, the One Ring. So our entire goal here is just to put pressure out there. I'm not Thoughtseizing because I want the opportunity to interact with Wrath of the Skies, with Teferi, something like that, so that my board position doesn't get worse. And if they want to Solitude my Nethergoyf, it's unfortunate, but it's not the end of the world. Wrath. I was expecting the follow-up counter spell, so when they didn't have the follow-up counter spell, I was kind of like, oh man, maybe I have a chance here. And then, for whatever reason, Moto Replay kind of froze a little bit here. Let's see if I can fast forward. Yeah, there we go. So we end up Thoughtseizing. See Flage, Solitude, Wrath of the Skies. They didn't Solitude in response, which I kind of understand because it would put them in a pretty awkward spot if they Solituded like off of the Wrath or something and the Flage couldn't kill my Nethergoyf. But I end up taking the Wrath because now if they want a Solitude, they have to exile the Flage, which is phenomenal for me. I get rid of like all the live cards in their hand if they do, if they go that route. But instead, they're just going to go to their turn and try to hard cast the Solitude, in which case we're going to, drown in the lock and move on with our lives. Go to game 2. In the sideboard, we're bringing in a couple copies of Flusterstorm. I'm bringing in at least one copy of Nihil Spellbomb. This list might have had 3 copies. If that's the case, I think I brought in 2. It's really good against Snapcaster, good against Flage. Game Action Deck. I love Game Action Deck. Game Action Deck is like my favorite thing to do in all of Magic. Is just, oh, I'm going to bobble myself. I'm going to Wraith. I'm going to find another bobble and bobble you. I'm going to fetch and shock. I'm going to thought seize. And now it's turn 2 and I got like 7 things in my yard because I've been making all these game actions. And I love it. But either way, here's kind of sequencing. So you might notice I led on Preordain here instead of leading on Tamiyo. And part of that is because I'm going to play the Watery Grave, play the Tamiyo. I should do it here. Usually I'm smart and do it. I guess I didn't. They might have been F6 there, which is why I went ahead and cycled the Wraith. But usually what I'll do is play the Watery Grave, play the Tamiyo, if in this case the Bauble, and then pass to combat, because a lot of players will be like, oh, I've got priority, let me kill the Tamiyo, let me path to exile the Tamiyo, let me whatever the Tamiyo here. And you get to go, well, in response, I'm going to cycle the Street Wraith, flip the Tamiyo, and now I go to my second main phase with my Planeswalker flipped over, ready to tick up. But again, like I said, I think in this case, they were just F6, so I just went ahead and cycled the Street Wraith. The Bauble was kind of like the test for that, which I know is like Magic Online, meh, but at the same time, if it's going to be obvious, might as well. People do it in paper all the time, where they're just like, yeah, whatever, just tell me when it's my turn. Okay. Cycle Wraith, flip Tamiyo. But thanks to all these Street Wraiths, we are able to get down a Shadow pretty quickly. There's a 1 ring, which we can effectively dispatch. Find another Street Wraith, so again, I'm able to play out a Tamiyo, go ahead and flip her. There are a lot of sequencing scenarios when it comes to Tamiyo, because you do have to remember that she only triggers on the 3rd card drawn. So if you've drawn 3 and you play her and draw a 4th, she does not trigger. So you got to make sure that if you have an opportunity to find a Tamiyo or to play a Tamiyo, that you might want to like save your Street Wraiths so that you can draw after Tamiyo gets down, instead of using them first and risking like Street Wraith, draw into a Preordain, cast Preordain, find a Tamiyo, and now I can't flip her. So Shadow getting in for a chunk. Our opponent's down to 4 cards. We have a flip Tamiyo. We've got a Drown in the Lock. I decide not to counter the Wrath of the Skies there. Well, I couldn't because they didn't have the cards in the yard, but I probably wouldn't have anyway, just because I had the Nethergoyf back up, I had the counterspell the next turn, I had Tamiyo ticking up, so I don't really feel like there's a huge pressure to have to counterspell that. Now this we're counterspelling. Plus it specifies that it doesn't hit Planeswalkers. It says like creature, artifact, enchantment. So I would have just had a Tamiyo flipped and been ticking her up. Now obviously them having Galvanic Discharge for the Tamiyo makes that a bit worse. But just clarifying that even if I could have countered that, I probably wouldn't have. Now, if I didn't have a backup threat and I could counter it, I would counter it. Got another Solitude. Go ahead and hit that. I usually want to use Drown in the Lock a little more aggressively in this matchup than Counterspell, because if they do end up getting a Flage into the yard, say off a Surveil, and they can escape it, then I need to have the Counterspell to interact with that, whereas the Drown in the Lock a lot of the times can't. And that's it. Nethergoyf going the distance. On to round number 4. Trophy leader Jarvis me. Not Jarvis you, Jarvis me. We're on the draw. They've got a Devourer of Destiny. Modern hot take. I think that if Eldrazi does really well at the Pro Tour, which, as we remember, is coming up in like 2 days, and we're going to have a watch party on the CntrlFreak stream for that. So if you want to check that out, link down below for the Twitch. Come hang out. Hot take. If Eldrazi does well at the Pro Tour, I think Devourer of Destiny is on the chopping block to get a ban. Why do I think that is? I don't think the card is like some insanely powerful Eldrazi cast trigger, but I think the consistency that this one card provides to the deck is absolutely insane. It allows you to first upkeep scry essentially to try to find an Ugin's Labyrinth, which you can then play exiling the Devourer of Destiny that you already had in your hand. So you get like the setup, all the setup in one card, which can let you play like your turn 1 Chalice, your turn 2 Trinisphere, your turn 2 Ring, your turn 2 Karn the Great Creator, your turn 2 Thought Knot, whatever. So I just think it like throws the consistency of the deck up through the roof because of Devourer of Destiny, and the fact that it's only like a $1.50 card or something means you can probably ban it pretty easily without upsetting the masses, because you still get Ugin's Labyrinth, your namesake cash card. You still get all the rest of the good Eldrazi. You just knock the consistency a bit. And I think that would be like a fairly... Also allows turn 1 talismans. I think that would be a pretty understandable ban choice. So I could play out a Nethergoyf here, but if my opponent's got like a Dismember or something, I'm just kind of screwed. So I thought I would take a turn to try to set up. Terrible choice. My original thought was, oh, they won't have 5 mana next turn for Through the Breach. I'm okay. And then they just have 4 mana for the One Ring. They also kind of had 4 mana for Thought Knot. So yeah, it was a meh sequence of events there. I definitely missequenced that pretty horribly. Sideboard, Consigned to Memories are coming in. Damping Spheres are coming in. I think I bring in Flusterstorm just for like Dismember and Kozilek's Command. That is a annoying card to play against. Hold up Consign here for a Chalice or a Talisman, Trinisphere. Which I was really hoping to like dodge something on their turn, find a land so I could Nethergoyf plus Damping Sphere in that order. Don't do it the other way or you're going to have a bad time. But I didn't find the land, so now that my opponent hadn't played anything, I want to get the Damping Sphere down so they can't like Thought Knot me this turn. Instead, they get a Trinisphere, and yeah. We do have some interaction for the Thought Knot. Thankfully, the Through the Breach version is a lot better at it than the other variations, the more like Tron-heavy variations. But most of the other ones have like this lull between 5 and 7-ish, or 4 and 7-ish mana. Like turn 4, they could have a Karn, a Thought Knot, a One Ring. But then there's like nothing up until you're hard casting Devourer of Destinies or World Breakers or stuff. But for these variations, having Thought Knot, having the One Ring, having Karn, and then like going up to 5 mana and having Through the Breach is a big deal. It means you really can't like take a turn off if they don't have a progression there. So we get down Shadow. Hope they don't have anything, but they have Through the Breach for an Emrakul, so we're dead in the air. Yeah, I got to do better. Like the last 3 or 4 times I've played against Eldrazi, I think I'm like 2-2, but I can directly attribute some of my losses to just bad sequencing, like just not playing around what I should have played around, not ordering spells the way I should have ordered spells. So opponent Scams of Grief, we find a way to deal with it, and now we're both in top deck mode, but we're in top deck mode with a counter spell. And if you know anything about top deck mode, the person who's in top deck mode with the counter spells usually doing a little bit better. Hey, look, a shadow. Go ahead and play that out. Since, you know, we can keep holding up counter spell. Opponent not doing much. Find another copy of Counterspell. Bowmaster. I really don't want to counter this Bowmaster, but opponents miss the land drop, so I'm kind of just hoping that they'll miss it one more time. But now it's like escape Nethergoyf territory. I don't have much of a choice. Turns out they were just like stockpiling a bunch of interaction. But hey, back to counter or top deck wars, and we got a counter spell. Okay. Why on earth did you let the Nethergoyf or the Necro dominance resolve? What is wrong with you? You're going to lose to Soul Spike and whatnot. First off, opponent's at 9 life. If I counterspell the Necro dominance, my Nethergoyf isn't getting bigger. Still a 3-turn clock. If I let the Necro dominance resolve, they can draw some cards into turn, potentially drawing up to 8. And if they don't find a Soul Spike, they just lose the game on the spot. If they do find a Soul Spike, then I've got Counterspell, and they have to have double Soul Spike, 4 more black cards to exile, and then whatever else in their, 10 cards? So they have to have the second Soul Spike. That's the big important one. If they don't have that, they just die on the spot because they don't have any extra mana to mess around with. And then there's always the chance that if they go like 3 cards deep, if they go down to 6 life, and I go to my turn, attack them with a Nethergoyf down to 3, pass the turn, then I might only have to answer one thing. Maybe I just have to answer like a Shieldred right then and there, and I've got Counterspell. So taking the calculated risk of I don't think they're going to draw double Soul Spike, and they do not. So we're able to move along to game number 2. Definitely have Fluster Storms coming in, trim on like some of the Wraiths and Thought Seizes that are costing a bunch of life. I just want to be able to get down a threat, say Nethergoyf, counterspell some Necro Dominances. Going ahead and playing out the Nethergoyf now, because if they have a Fatal Push, they'd be able to kill the Nethergoyf later anyway. I wouldn't have the cards in the yard needed to get Nethergoyf big enough to actually Stubborn Denial it. And it would be turn 3 before I could Nethergoyf, Drown in the Lock of Fatal Push, in which case I need to be interacting with the Necro Dominance or the One Ring or the Shieldred or something like that, and can't mess around with like countering a Fatal Push. So we get go ahead and get the Nethergoyf down on 1, so that I can start like building up a board state, counter stuff on curve, instead of having to worry about like countering removal spells and things. Soul Spike, you got it. Like Inquisition of Stub, Soul Spike of Stub, cool. I've got another Nethergoyf. I've got a mountain of counter spells in the deck, not necessarily in hand. They've missed their 3rd land drop, so now we're even farther away off of like Shieldred. And they proceed to not Profane Tutor for a land, which is really, really good on my end. Bowmaster, yeah, you got it. All that's doing is chump blocking for a couple turns. Like, this is one of those moments where you really have to pay a lot of attention to, like, threat assessment. Bowmaster, just not a card that matters here in the slightest. Killing my second Nethergoyf is a little bit annoying because I kind of want to keep the pressure up, keep the clock going. But I just don't need to overextend and use up, like, all my counter spells, and we end up top decking Dismember, and we can just kill them right then and there. But you get the idea. Like, Bowmaster doesn't matter. It's not killing me. It's not stopping my threats. It's just delaying a little bit. And since they're already missing their land drop, I don't really mind that they're delaying a bit, because even if they find the land drop, I've got counter magic. Okay. Yeah, some of the changes I made from that league to the next one whenever I post it. I added a couple of copies of Force Negation and 2 Harbinger of the Seas in the sideboard, mostly for Tron. Been seeing a really big uptick in Tron and Eldrazi Tron, and just the Eldrazi decks. So Harbinger gives you a really good way of interacting with Eye of Ugin and Ugin's Labyrinth and all that stuff. A lot of these lists are only running like 1 waste. So if you can catch them without that, then the only thing you really have to worry about is like Karn the Great Creator, Chalice of the Void, and All is Dust. And once you've got like Counterspell, Force Negation, Stubborn Denial, you can handle those fairly well. The Force Negations help to fight over like Trinisphere, Chalice on the draw, help fight over One Ring, Karn the Great Creator, stuff that you want to counter after you play your Harbinger. So you can play out your Harbinger protected on their turn with Force Negation. And I'd usually recommend bringing in Flusterstorm in that matchup. It's not great against most of the deck, but it's better than like a Fatal Push or a Dismember or something, because it does allow you, maybe a Drowning Lock does allow you to fight over Kozilek's Command and Dismember, All is Dust, stuff like that. And if Storm count is not 1 or 0 at the time of casting the Flusterstorm, you can counter stuff through a Chalice of the Void, which is really fun. But the only other card that I think I would really consider for those matchups is Tishana's Tidebinder. Help counter the One Ring, Karn activation, counter the Chalice triggers, stuff like that. It's 3 CMC, so it doesn't get hit by a lot. So if that matchup continues to be more popular, you might see me put a couple copies of Tishana's Tidebinder over, say, a Flusterstorm and something else. But that's about it for this video. Hope the list is working for you if you decide to give it a shot. Otherwise, feel free to let me know in the comments below what isn't working for you, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. Yeah, let me know. Modern's wide open right now, so stuff's kind of going crazy. But hope everybody has a fantastic rest of your day. Stay safe. Enjoy some good food and company. I will catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.